Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Mac 6 Entrepreneurial Center right here in Tempe, Arizona, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. And we have today with us Guardian Tax Law, Hubert Johnson. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
All the way up, hailing from Tucson, Arizona. Thank you for making the drive here.
Yeah, it was glad to be here.
How often do you get up to the Phoenix area?
Probably once or twice a month.
And I know when, I can't recall who on your team talked about having this conversation today, they said that you are looking forward to, within the next 6 to 12 months, expanding more into the Phoenix area, as well as the folks that you serve in your area.
Absolutely. We're looking to establish an office and have an attorney presence in Phoenix.
Okay, so good. This is the kind of the prelude. This is the opportunity to let people know that you're landing here. And at the end of our segment, of course, we'll share how folks can get to know you and where they can find you. But let's have you start telling a little bit about who you are, why law, why taxes, and how have you always been interested in that? We've got up to an hour, so please take your time and help us get to know you better.
Why law? I actually had two choices, history or law, and my undergraduate degree was actually to teach high school history. There's a sociology degree in California. And if people remember, back in the Arnold Schwarzenegger days, they started pink slipping all the teachers. And that was my junior year in college. So I started looking around to see what could I do. And I would have been going into this as a brand new teacher. So it was kind of scary. And so I took the LSAT, did very well on it. And so I figured, why not? With law, I've always considered maybe being an attorney. And there's not much else you can do with a history degree besides teach. So I went to law school. I got a C in federal income tax in law school. If you would have told me in law school I'd be a tax attorney, I probably would have walked away. And I ended up just falling into it a year or two after law school. And just, I've enjoyed it, loved it. And it's all I do.
And you have worked for several different law firms until opening Guardian Tax Law, right?
Yes.
And what made you decide to go out on your own, and how has that been? It's been since 2018?
2018. So working for other people, you see the good, the bad, and everybody has this idea. If I ran my own place, I'd do it this way. And the real idea behind Guardian Tax Law is to make sure that we're taking care of clients, that we are doing things differently than your average company. And we really do strive to provide top-notch customer service and free advice. And that's the key difference, is that getting free advice is really hard to find. Good free advice where you can get steered in the right direction rather than stepping in a bear trap.
Mm-hmm. So if someone had a question about tax, whether are these independent clients as well as business owners, you serve both, or you work just with strictly with businesses?
No, we work with individuals and businesses, and we have people all the time that call us and say, hey, we have these questions. If the case is too small for us, we'll try to refer them on either to a CPA or there are free legal tax clinics across the country. They took a big hit post-COVID, after COVID, but they're still out there. And I think just within the last few days, I referred someone to want to get their tax returns prepared for free.
And you're going to guide, what I hear you saying is you're going to guide us in the right direction, whether we become clients or not.
Absolutely. And we'll follow up with people to make sure that they get connected with a good CPA. And through BNI, which is a networking group, we have contacts all across the United States. So I've referred people from New York to Florida to California.
Yeah. How long have you been part of BNI?
2019.
What? Really? That's a long time.
I had been part of BNI before, back in 2013. And so I knew about it. And so it was one of the first things I did when I opened my business. I knew BNI would be great for my company. And part of it is being a rare duck. There's not a lot of tax attorneys out there. I can go and visit all kinds of chapters and really make my presence known. And it's been a huge help for us ever since.
So good. Shout out to your chapter. What is your chapter called or named? Is there a name?
No, it's the Achievers chapter. I'm not in it anymore because I've gotten too busy. but we have an excellent representative who, again, he's very well known. We just had our gala, I think it was February, and he took like 3 awards in the entire region.
And he represents Guardian Tax.
He represents Guardian Tax, but it's a little unfair because he gets the referrals from the whole office, all under his name.
A
So
little unfair, but we'll let him do it.
yeah, we'll roll with it.
I love it. Oh, so good. Well, great. Before we get into the meat of conversation as it relates to tax and law and some of the things that you've expressed that you want our listeners and viewers to know about, I'm anxious to hear a little bit about the TV show that you're hosting, because I really think that speaks to your expertise and your knowledge and how well sought after you are right now. So it's called Taxes Made Easy, and it is on the smartmoneyculture.tv channel station, and also then you upload those episodes to your YouTube channel for Guardian Tax Law. How did you get started with this, and where is it being shown? Tell us a little bit about how that is going down for you.
So I actually ran into a gentleman who he's got big ideas. He's been wanting to launch this TV channel for a while, launched it in January. And so he wanted me to appear on it. And I've been hosting this show since January. And one of the big questions is, how do I come up with content? A lot of it is my experiences daily working with the IRS, with the states and other government agencies, but also going through the news. There's news all the time about developments, what's happening, and there's been so many changes with the IRS. It's so hard for the average person to know where to turn in dealing with their tax issues because there's been so much change.
Mm-hmm. Great. And you're having fun. You're enjoying doing that?
Yeah. No, I love it. Again, when you see it really impact people in a sincere way, and you see that difference, that's why I've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah. Good. Well, we thank you for that. And it's embedded in the name of your company, Guardian Tax Law. You're looking out for us, the Guardian. Is there something deeper or another piece of that story around having named your practice that way?
No.
Perfect.
No, there's not.
Well, once you start to describe, obviously who you are and how you as a team show up professionally on our behalf, it was evident that, that makes sense why he named it Guardian Tax Law. So love that. And I know you're a family man. You and your wife, Katie, have been together for quite a long time. A boatload of kids.
5 kids altogether.
Yeah, 21 to 12 or
10
to 10.
And to be fair, 2 of them are with my second wife. So
okay. Got
long story there.
Hey, we'll just save that for another segment.
Sure.
But that's great. I love hearing that. And outside of work, what do you like to do for fun?
I play ultimate frisbee, or I'm trying to get out there and do that more. I love to referee. I do that with my kids. I volunteer with my church, a lot of youth activities. I volunteer with different charities. I love junior achievement because they teach K through 12 financial literacy in schools, especially to underprivileged schools. And then, look for other ways to volunteer as well. But, I keep busy.
Yeah. If we're not, I said earlier when we talked about our kids before we came on air, I said idle minds, right? My son just went back to school yesterday and I'm like, thank goodness, because the whole summer, while it was very short in the Tempe School District, it was long enough that he got kind of lazy. So I'm like, yay, structure, school, homework, sports, you name it. So good. Well, let's move into the topic of conversation as it relates to taxes and just all the things that you can share with us. Let's start by helping us understand when would someone need a tax attorney? Like, when does that become important?
So interestingly enough, I actually spoke about this morning, that the IRS is making it easier in one area to get tax information. And I like to promote this and give IRS kudos when they deserve it. So irs.gov online, if you can set up an online account, you have to do your face scan. You have to give them all kinds of personal information. But once you get that, they're trying to enable people more and more to get information directly from the IRS. And you can get transcripts. You can get a history of account. You can even see what's going on with tax liens, your refund. And these are all new changes. This announcement came out, I think today.
Meaning it's now accessible to us. If we vet ourselves and it's really us, we have access to that. That's the change.
That is they've been developing this for a while, but a lot of the, as far as being able to look at your transcripts or especially the tax lien information, that's new. And they've been putting a lot of effort into developing this. And I try to steer people to this because a lot of people just don't know what's going on. And if you can get that basic information, that really helps. And you can even set up a simple installment agreement online as well. A lot of people call, they owe 5 to 10,000. And I'm even then, if they just owe 20,000, they just want to pay it. They have the money. They can go in and they don't have to pay someone a couple $1,000s just to do something that they can do on their own. So typically when people call and that's their situation, I ask them, are you comfortable calling the IRS? Have you ever talked to them? And there's a lot of people like, no, don't want to touch it. Don't want to even go there. But there's some people that have done it before and they feel comfortable doing it. I'm like, okay, this is how you can do it fairly easily. That's their online program.
Mm-hmm.
In person, it's harder than ever. You can't get through to the IRS. Most of the time you call and it just, call back another day is what they tell you.
Yep. It dead ends.
Dead ends. So one of the key pieces of advice, and I would highlight this for your listeners, the best time to call the IRS is Wednesday through Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Most people don't understand that the IRS is open till 7 p.m. in your area locally. So it goes by time zone. And you can, if you have a New York number, you can call much earlier. If you have a number on the West Coast, you can call much later. And that later time period, you're going to get the better representatives. It's easy to get through to, even though they've been hanging up on you all day long. And I give that advice out freely. So if you just want to call, get some information, that's the best way to do it.
I wrote it down. I want to make sure I had it right. Wednesdays and Thursdays between 5 and 7.
5 and 7 p.m.
Brilliant.
Best time to get through. Now, not all of the more complicated areas are not open. And the IRS has become a huge fan of bureaucracy. It is a giant bureaucratic collection agency. That's really what it is. They have added at least 2 different layers to their collections, which it doesn't make sense. When I even talk to the IRS representatives, they agree it doesn't make sense. They don't know why it's happening. But when you call on the first and you get to like the second layer, they can help you. They can give you transcripts, but they can't do anything on your case. They have to transfer you to collections. But now collections can't give you transcripts, so they have to transfer you back.
Oh, no.
And it's hours of hold time in between these transfers or calls, and it's hard enough to get through in the first place. It's just a mess. So if you can't afford payments, if you can't afford to pay what they're demanding that you pay, you do have legal rights and options. And the hard part is knowing what they are.
You just knowing how to navigate that requires someone like yourself who's well versed in it, especially because things keep changing.
Well, the worst part about it, the IRS gives bad information out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a large sarcastic streak in me. There's plenty of times I've called into the IRS and not revealed that I was a tax attorney right away. And they tell me, you have to pay this. You have to pay this by the deadline. This is how much you have to pay. And it's almost like a pressure sales environment. And a lot of people call the IRS and they were like, and they'll even set up installment agreements, even though they can't afford it. And we're talking about retirees on Social Security, sometimes little old ladies with nothing, they don't have 2 nickels to rub together.
Mm-hmm.
And we look over their case. Look, you qualify for either an offer or to not pay anything in a hardship plan. There are options. And when I'm in these conversations with the IRS and I say, well, what if they can't afford to pay? Oh, well, then you have to go through the whole financials. Well, I have it ready to go and I can go over it with you here on the phone. If you know how to do it, you can do it right there in the conversation. And then once they realize you know what they're talking about, their demeanor completely changes.
Interesting.
I know it's frustrating because
so frustrating.
They should be public servants. They should be helping the average taxpayer out, but they make it so hard for the average individual to get served, to get good information. And part of it is they've hired so many new people, they don't know what they're talking about most of the time. You have to get a couple layers deep before you get people that actually know what they're talking about. One of the biggest issues, and I've seen, I actually shared this I think last week with the CPA, she didn't know this. How many years of past returns do you have to file? Do you know?
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah.
So the IRS gives the answer of 10 years.
Okay.
Unless they're in collections and they know better. The true answer is 6. So if you, and there's a lot of CPAs, there's a lot of tax preparers that are out there preparing 10 years worth of tax preparers. The only reason to file an older tax return is to replace a return that the IRS already filed for you, because they file for you in the worst way possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you're getting charged to file those older returns. Can't help you, can only incur debt because you can't get refunds more than 3 years old. And scary story. I had someone come in one time, and he had filed 23 years of return going back to 1996.
He had not filed.
He had not filed for that entire time, decided to get straight with the IRS, and he was so proud of himself coming in. And when he shared that with me, I believe it was actually over a phone call. He didn't actually come in, but he shared that with me, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, did you get good advice first? Did you talk to someone first? And he said, no, I thought I was going to get straight with the IRS.
And I knew it was the right thing. In my mind, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, but this was, I think, 2021. He filed all the way back to 1996. So this debt from 1996, the time IRS tax debt expires after 10 years from when it was assessed in most cases. So this debt from 96 that would have expired a couple of decades ago started running in 2021 when he filed the return.
Kind of reopened in a sense.
Yeah, and so you had 10 years from 21 to deal with this tax debt out to 2031 for all of these tax years. I'm like, I wish you would have called me first. I was like, did you already mail him? And he's like, yes, I just put him in the mail.
Oh.
So this is why I say call, even if you don't hire us, if you just have basic questions. We would much rather one of my assistants, when you call and talk to someone at our firm, they can give you this good information. At 2 different firms that I worked for, and these are tax companies, I showed up and I got hired on as a senior tax attorney, and they were doing 10 years of tax prep. I pulled out the IRM, which is the Internal Revenue Manual. It's like their Bible, and showed them that it says only 6 years, and they changed their practice. But for many years, they've been telling people 10 years and charging them to do that.
Yeah.
Not knowing better. So it is so key to talk to someone that is experienced and knows how to go directly to the source and convey good information and save people a lot of money.
You talk a little bit about some of the terms, like offer in compromise, or payoffs. Like what? Oh boy, how do we navigate some of that? No, I love it. and we just need definitions so that we can navigate this.
So just to kind of parse it out, an installment agreement means that you're paying the IRS and you're paying most of your balance in most cases. You can do installment agreements where you're only paying, it's called a partial pay installment agreement. So let's say they want $1,000 a month and you can only pay $300. You can go in and argue with them. And if you can prove up that you can only pay $300 a month, they have to take it. Even if the limit is coming up and the tax debt is expiring, they have to take it. If you qualify, you can go into what's called a hardship status, where you don't have to pay anything for at least 2 years. 0 payments for 2 years. They're not going to be looking at you as long as you don't owe again, you file your tax returns. And then they have the offer and compromise program, also called the Fresh Start Initiative. So it's always been the offer and compromise program, but I think it was Obama administration. They did a PR blitz. They made some changes, good changes to the offer and compromise program, and gave it a new name for PR purposes, but it's the same program. And I like to compare it to Cinderella's shoe. It is an amazing service, but I would say about 20 to 30% of the population actually qualifies for it. So I talk to people all the time. I heard about this. Do I qualify? And we'll go through their numbers. We'll go through their financial statement. If they do, great. We'll tell them why. If they don't, we'll be upfront with them and tell them, hey, you don't, but these are the options. So we sit down in our initial consultation, go through their financial information and give them their different options and explain to them the pros and cons of each one. And that's where being informed is so important. Sometimes I thought, that there's been times where I thought someone qualified to pay $0 to the IRS, but they really wanted to deal with it. That's how they, morally, they felt like they wanted to pay their tax debt and they wanted to do the installment agreement that they didn't need us for. I'm like, okay, great. But going back to the offer and compromise, I've done offers for as low as $20. And this is to wipe out 10, 20. One case, it was $250,000 in debt, settled for $20.
Settled. Wow.
Gone. Sounds too good to be true. This is why you get all those commercials that people see.
I was just going to ask. Right, the ads. So what you're talking about is working with the IRS to either consolidate, wipe out, manage. How does this compare to all these ads, or are the ads you're referring to actually IRS ads?
No, they're not IRS ads. IRS does not. So here's the crazy thing. When you're talking to the IRS and you're talking, because there are different departments, offer and compromise, that's like one hand. The collections department is in another hand. The audit department is a completely different hand. It's just think of it as a giant bureaucracy where the hands do not talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
There's very, very poor communication, if at all, between the different hands. So if you have a hard case and you're not getting where you think you need to do, collections will often tell people, oh, just file an offer. Without talking to them, and most of them don't even know if they qualify or not. I've had revenue officers, which are part of collections. They should know, they should be more informed, but suggest, oh, why don't you do an offer? And I say, because I've already reviewed it, and this, and this is why they don't qualify. So why am I going to charge him to do something that's just going to get rejected? Mm-hmm. The offer and compromise program is amazing. I had one guy, he was homeless in the streets of New York, had a 14-year-old with him, was able to do an offer with IRS and settle over $100,000 for $20. And then turned around with New York. New York has been more difficult, but we are ready to get an offer approved for them to wipe out about $125,000. But they're asking for $25,000 to do it. So he has a sponsor that's going to give him the money and settle it so he can move on with his life.
It's life-changing.
It is.
Life-saving.
His driver's license has been suspended for years, and he's been getting jobs or being able to go out. In some industries, you can't work if you have tax liens or tax issues. Mm-hmm. So it really does provide a clean slate for people. But you have to qualify. So this is why it's so important to talk to someone first. True story, I had someone come in and they had put, I think it was $20,000 down on a credit card. They owed around $80,000, put it all on a credit card and paid it down to $60,000. Then called us. They qualified for an offer. We were able to settle the $60,000 for a couple $100.
Oh my!
The other $20,000 we could have settled too, but since they put it on a credit card, now they have this credit card bill that we can't help them with.
With what crazy interest rate?
Crazy interest rates, right? So this is why I say call, get some free advice before you do something that can really hurt you. I've had plenty of people that they get a settlement, they get some money. What's the first thing they do? They pay off credit cards. Mm-hmm. One of the worst things you can do.
Really?
Because the IRS treats it as it's non-secured debt or unsecured debt, mm-hmm. and tax debt takes priority. So if you're paying off medical bills, if you're doing necessary repairs to your home, if you're paying student loans, other government debt, that's all allowable expenses and expenditures. But if you go, I had one true story, someone, wasn't my case, but another attorney's. They got $100,000 and they owed over $100,000 to the IRS. They went to Vegas and blew it on a shopping and gambling spree.
Oh, no.
So they figured if they didn't have the money anymore, the IRS couldn't demand it.
And they did.
Well, they told them no deal, no resolutions for you. We are going to garnish you. Wherever you work, we're going to garnish your wages. We're going to levy your bank accounts with no relief until somehow you figure out how to pay us.
So let's give the opposite example. Had they had that 100,000 and they didn't go to, do a crazy shopping spree, how might the IRS hypothetically have worked with them?
So another true story. I had a client in the middle of an offer and compromise. She's on Social Security, definitely qualifies for it. We're doing a $20 offer to wipe out 100,000. I don't remember exactly how much was owed. Right in the middle of our offer, her mother passes away. And she gets a $300,000 inheritance. You think the IRS is going to accept that offer?
No.
So with the $300,000, we took about $100,000, got her into a home that she could afford. So she wasn't renting anymore. It was an inexpensive home. And she still had monthly payments after that, but it was a good down payment. the other 200,000, because she was retired, we put into an investment for her, conservative investment, so that she could draw off monthly. And they ignored that because as an asset, because it now was an income stream. So if you talk to us, work with us, we can absolutely move things around. She still got the $20 offer.
And is in a home where it's not extravagant, but it works for her, and she is comfortable and able to start to rebuild.
In a much better place for herself.
For sure. Wow. So I have a lot of questions running through my mind. The first one is more kind of a let's back up. Clearly, you've got the experience. You kind of fell into tax accidentally, but law was always something you're interested in. What I'm curious about with this wisdom and this expertise really is what I'm seeing. Where does that loving heart come from? Where in your life, when you name your practice Guardian Tax Law, and have said over and over again, free advice, we're here for you. And I really genuinely sense that you really want people to be okay and have the right information, whether they're clients or not. How did Hubert become that person? Is that something that just you grew up with that in your family?
Faith.
Yeah. I love hearing that.
Faith. I grew up as a Christian. I go attend the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I served a mission in Peru for 2 years. And when you go to a foreign country and you see parents picking fleas out of the kids' hair, it makes you appreciate what you have a little more. Funny part of that story, I had when I flew out to Peru, I made sure I had a can of dog and cat flea powder.
You knew ahead of time. They tell you ahead of time.
Yeah. So
and you're 18. How old are you at this point?
I was a little older because I served in the Navy first.
Okay.
And I was, how old was I? I guess I was 21 to 23.
Okay.
So I was a little older, but this family's picking fleas out of their kids' hair, and I'm like, I have this powder from the United States, and in Spanish. So it's like, I have this special powder from the United States that can help with them. They're like, oh, please, because they can't listen about God or faith when they've got the kids are infested with fleas. So I brought it the next time. I said, use it carefully. This might be a little, dangerous or
you could use too much.
Yeah. And they were in this little one-room bamboo hut. She snagged the bottle from me, took it in there, and just emptied the whole thing in her home.
Oh my God, that might be too much.
So I what do you do but laugh? But
and you're without that as a way to support the rest of the folks you're serving.
So my very next letter home was, please send dog
more.
And cat flea powder, because it's not readily accessible in Peru. And I actually needed it later. I went to another place where the missionaries that were there before me they had a jar, and their goal was to catch 10 live fleas a week, and they were doing it.
Oh no.
So I would sprinkle it on my blanket every night when I went to bed. And after about a week, I started finding dead fleas, and I could sleep in peace.
Yes.
But it was anyway.
So faith has been your guide. I didn't see that in the information that you and your team shared with me, that you had been in the Navy. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And then really just, I'm so inspired by how you show up, and it's very similar how I live my life, making sure that I'm of service in as many ways as I possibly can. Sometimes at the sacrifice of earning a living. So you and I probably should have a conversation. You can help me get in that direction. But I'm appreciative, because oftentimes folks have this knowledge and they stay on top of things for us, and yet there's a hard door to open, to knock on. And if you don't come with a lot of money, then it's hard, to your point earlier when you're talking about all these jumps we have to go through to connect with the IRS and get the information we need. It's great to have someone like yourself and your team ready to help us. Talk a little bit about your team. So you're not flying solo here. You mentioned the gentleman who shows up to the BNI group and has that community for you. Who else is on the team? And then at what point do you look at, will you start looking for somebody up here in the Metro Phoenix area?
Our goal is to have someone hired by January.
Okay.
And to be looking and making sure we have a place. And I mean, again, this is our next hire, hands down. But a little bit of my team. So Russ Sullivan, he is a BNI guru. So he gets in conference talks with like the national and international directors. And And the guy that he's retired, did 30 years plus in the Air Force, and used to joke around with generals and stuff. But he's a great guy, very laid back, but he's excellent at, he loves spreadsheets and he loves connecting with people. His wife is actually hired him, told him he retired, and she told him to get back to work because we needed somebody. And she's my office manager. And so we joke around that she's my boss. And she handles office in an amazing way.
Wonderful.
We have Alexa Kelleher, who is our legal assistant. Again, handles all the footwork, most of the client contact, most of the paperwork, and does an amazing job for us. And then I really ran across a gem with Ruben Salcido. Interesting story. He his family lives in Mexico, but his parents had a house in Tucson. They have like a ranch where that they rent out to hunters and stuff in Mexico, so they're not too rough. they do just fine. But his sister is already an immigration attorney in the States.
Oh, wow.
And so he went to U of A in Tucson and graduated. And after he graduated, he was having a hard time getting his bar approval. So we took him on as a legal assistant. He was working for us in that capacity, thinking that he would, pass the bar or get approved. It took 1.5 years. He finally had to hire an attorney to get approved by the Arizona bar because he was an attorney previously in Mexico, and they wanted some definitive proof he didn't have any bad record in Mexico. But it's like, they don't have a bar. They don't have anything like this. So he had a struggle to get licensed. But once he did, he's amazing. He's fluent in Spanish, which we love. I speak Spanish, but after 40 years, I can hold a conversation in Spanish, but I'm a little rusty. But I love that to provide that assistance to Spanish speakers as well.
Yeah. So for any of our listeners or viewers who either themselves are an attorney, well-versed in taxes, or know somebody, is it as easy as giving your office a call and just saying, hey, might be worth talking to so-and-so about this opportunity coming up?
Absolutely.
At the beginning of the year. Okay. Very good. What are the biggest challenges that you see businesses facing today? And then how can you guys best help us?
Rising costs.
I probably could have answered that question by myself.
Yeah, it's
right.
Rising costs and making missteps. So one of the worst things when businesses face missteps, it is so easy and it's such a temptation not to pay taxes. And the easiest tax not to pay is payroll taxes. Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
We help people with payroll liabilities on a regular basis. I've handled all kinds of businesses, large, small. The IRS is extremely aggressive about payroll taxes, and it's one of the few. So just to take a quick step backwards, almost all business taxes under an EIN, if the business fails, you can walk away from. And even with EIDL loans, we mentioned those real quick from the SBA. If it's under 200,000 and it's under your business EIN, you can walk away from that too. Payroll is the one thing you can't walk away from. That and sales taxes with the state, but state taxes are a little bit different. So pay your sales taxes. Make sure you pay the state, and we deal with those cases as well. But don't owe payroll taxes. The IRS will assign half of it to you personally. They will go after the business, and really it is a race to keep the business open before the IRS padlocks the doors. And I've seen it happen. I've done the interviews where the revenue officer goes in and goes through and walks through the business and marks off what can be removed and what is a fixture to the building. And the staff was standing around looking at it like, what in the world is happening? A week later, the doors were padlocked. And during that whole time, the owner didn't contact me, was ghosting me, and the IRS. Bad idea. Don't hire someone and then blow them off.
Right.
But people, they hide, they bury their heads in the sand.
Well, there's shame involved in it. And
there is.
And just saying, sometimes folks just can't, it's just too much for them.
It is. And when you talk about really helping people out, I can't, my boss, my office manager, teases me that I make people cry when they come in to meet with me.
I can see that. No, in a loving way.
Yeah. But they come in and they have this burden. I have people that told me, look, you saved me from committing suicide. It's not worth it. True story. Years ago, when I was first, learning the business, tax law, there was a gentleman that flew a small plane into an IRS building in Austin, Texas, killed himself, injured quite a few IRS representatives, but these are normal people working. I talked to some of the people that were in the building, knew people that got hurt, and then the just horror of, oh my gosh, I'm just working a job here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of great people that work for the IRS. There are plenty of people that aren't so great, but it's just a normal job to them. They just come in and punch a clock. And then when you understand that, it's not worth going to extremes. It's absolutely not worth it. On a little bit lighter note, I did represent one person who just got mad and frustrated with the IRS, and he told them, someone should bomb you guys.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, don't ever say
They
that.
said that to somebody on the phone or
With the IRS.
it's like in the airport.
Yeah.
I would imagine they take it as seriously.
Oh, they prosecuted him. He was convicted. And as part of his conviction, he couldn't call the IRS anymore. Which makes sense.
Understandably so.
So he had to hire us. It was for something fairly simple, but we took care of him, and he was fine afterwards. And he was laughing about it. He's like, I should have never said that. I'm like, yeah, watch your temper. This is why, and there's plenty of times we stand between a client and the IRS when they're too mad, they're too upset, and we explain things to them. And sometimes it's just, let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's understand where the IRS is coming from, because I had one guy, multi-million-dollar case. This guy was an actor, and he's paying the IRS hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to get caught up on his taxes. But he was getting bad advice and didn't know it. And the people giving him the advice didn't know better either. So what they were doing is they're paying on the oldest tax return first. Bad idea. And he was owing every single year. The number one thing you want to do is make sure you don't owe on the current year. Because if you don't, so right now we're halfway through 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard for someone to get caught up in 2024. But at least start in the current month and don't owe moving forward. And if you show the IRS you're not going to be a problem moving forward, you can arrange something on your back taxes. You can set up something what you can afford to pay. You can do something. But if you're owing moving forward, one, you're incurring all the penalties of a new year. Second of all, they can't set up a resolution for you. So they didn't even understand that. And in 2023, November of 23, Congress, in their wisdom, sarcasm alert, increased the penalties up to 8% throughout the year. So if you're not making if you're not paying in sufficient taxes either through estimated tax payments or from your W-2 withholding, you're going to get hit with an extra 8% on any taxes that you didn't withhold that you should have at the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
So this is the first year. It was 3%. Now it's jumped up to 8% with inflation. A lot of people are going to get surprised in 2024. So with them, I got them on track, paying in the current year first, not trying to catch up with the oldest year where all the penalties have already been assessed. Interest was ongoing, but we were able to abate over $250,000 in penalties and interest off the older years and make sure he wasn't going to owe moving forward. They were trying for years to pay off this debt, not getting anywhere. Within a year working with this, it might have been a year and a half, we had them set up in a payment plan. They weren't owing moving forward, and they knew exactly what they needed to do moving forward. And with the actor strike, their income dropped. We revised things, went back and renegotiated with the IRS, and we're taking care of them long term.
And how would you know to navigate that unless somebody is aware of the laws and the changes and the opportunities to how to do things correctly, which is what makes you guys the experts. Yeah, let the guys stick with acting. And really, I mean, when we talk to business owners, right, and we have these folks like yourself who come on, these experts, and talk about different aspects of business, there's a reason why you all are in business and there to serve, so that whoever is the business owner can focus on the things that they do best and make sure that they're doing what they need to do as it comes to all the ancillary things that we need to be aware of when we run our businesses. I've
got a great story right on point with that. And this is a friend from church. The guy did custom copper roofing in California. He lived in the Sacramento area. But it was such high-end work that he would only do it in the Bay Area. People in even Granite Bay, then ritzier areas of Sacramento wouldn't pay the kind of money he was charging. but he would get those prices and more in the Bay Area. His wife was managing the books. She was not a trained accountant, and he started getting letters from the IRS and the state of California. And you don't want to play with the state of California. So I sat down, went over the situation with him, and he owed about $150,000 to the IRS, $100,000 to the state because he was reporting his income incorrectly. We got a CPA on board. We got a corporate attorney on board to help him, give him advice. I dealt with the immediate issue of holding the IRS at bay and setting him up on resolutions, and payment plans mostly. He didn't even know how much he was making. And you'd be surprised. You give me a look. How many business owners don't even know how much they're making? It is so common out there. And how are you supposed to pay your taxes throughout the year if you don't know how much you're making?
We can't.
So I'm telling CPAs all across the country, you ideally, to provide the best service to your customer, up your game, give them quarterly profit and loss statements, which means people need to be using QuickBooks or something where you can pull that information quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it enables the business owners to make business decisions throughout the year too.
Yep.
They can be on top of their IRS issues, make wise business decisions, and you stay on top of your estimated tax payments. So with him, because we handled the tax issues and I set up payment plans, he was able to focus on what he was doing. He hired another crew, didn't want to deal with the tax debt. And in a year, he went to work. He just went to work, did what he did best, and paid off both the IRS
Beautiful story.
and the FTB. And ironically, in 2008, they had lost their home through a foreclosure. And so they bought a home. It was an 800 square foot home. They had a couple acres, but it was a tiny home. And they had 3 kids living in this 800 square foot home. Once he realized what his true numbers were, he doubled the size of a home, landscaped it, put in a swing set, fence, grass for his kids, and they absolutely loved it. So vastly improved the quality of life for his family. And he knew how much he was making and could plan accordingly. But most people are swinging in the dark without good advice, without good direction. So we try to put a team, and that's a great example of putting a team of professionals, because long-term, we usually aren't on a case. We'll stay on a case for years if needed. But once we joke around that if we do our job right, we don't get repeat business.
I love that. Yeah. So when do we need a tax attorney?
It's hard to tell if you need a tax attorney or not. So I'm going to go back to the thing I've been repeating. If you're not sure,
Find out.
Call, get some good advice. And if you don't need us, there's plenty of times where someone calls us and they're working with somebody else, or they have a CPA. I said, look, if they're doing a great job, we'll follow up with you in a couple months, make sure everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do have issues, we'll answer them. We can do a quick check-in real quick. And there's times where people, we do pro bono work at times as well, where I had someone call in homeless in New York, living out of his car, ready to lose both legs due to diabetes. And he had a career. He was successful. But again, if you're in New York and you don't move out before you hit rock bottom, it's really hard to move out of that state.
Mm-hmm.
People get trapped there. So we're helping them out pro bono. And it's just one of those things, trying to do the right thing by people. I mean, there's no way he could pay my fees.
Right. Wow. Is it FBAR? Is that how I pronounce it?
FBAR, yes.
That's an acronym for what? And tell us a little bit about that.
So I don't know off the top of my head what the acronym is for, but this is an interesting area of law that most people don't know about. It has been a huge money maker for Republican and Democrat administrations. So they have been pushing this and pursuing this in a very bipartisan manner.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, it was passed back in the 70s to go after criminal enterprises that were hiding assets, shell corporations. So when they found money in overseas accounts, they could seize it. They could prosecute them under this failure to report assets.
Okay.
So any foreign bank accounts that's with the foreign entity, you're supposed to report that on your tax return. A lot of people don't know about this. It's been around and it's really been pushed for really the last 15 years. Well, closer to 12. But a lot of the programs, they had a voluntary disclosure program, no longer in place. So people that have to worry about this are people that have more than $10,000 in a foreign account. All you have to do is report it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't been reporting it, because a lot of people don't know about it, you have to do what's called a disclosure. And the best way to do that is called a streamlined disclosure. And you pretty much have to do a mea culpa. It's my fault. This is why. But you share the good and the bad.
Yeah.
I
didn't know. Now I know.
Now you know, and now
here's
I'm going to
what-
comply. And that's a 5% of the total asset. If the IRS finds you, the penalties are at least 50% of the asset value and criminal penalties on top of it. It's
Wow.
one of the charges that they hit Paul Manafort with. So there's been some very high profile cases in the last few years where they've used this to go after people. And they regularly prosecute people for this.
So if you have a foreign account over the amount of
10,000.
10,000, you need to make sure that you're compliant with FBAR, which, by the way, super easy. I just looked it up. Foreign Bank and Financial Accounting Report, right? So Foreign Bank Accounting Report.
And it's an easy report. They made it easier than ever. It used to have to report it separately. Not all CPAs or tax preparers are comfortable with doing FBAR reporting. But so if you run into someone and you just need someone that's comfortable doing FBAR reporting, I have plenty of CPAs that will do them. Not everybody does. It's a little twist. Not everybody's comfortable with it. But doing the back reporting is where you would need an attorney. For example, one case, great case, and we were able to turn this around fairly quickly. This gal came from Portugal, but she grew up in Cabo Verde. So islands off of Portugal. Her father, not a U.S. citizen, never came to the United States, had created accounts when she was a child. So she knew she had these accounts, but it was just whenever she was a child, she didn't think there was much in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
She moved to the United States, went to med school, met a Canadian here in med school, and now they're practicing doctors I think they were both doing their residencies. And, life is looking great. And then they go to their CPA, and the CPA asked them the first year, do you have any foreign accounts over 10,000? Like, oh, no. And then the second year, she's like, well, let me check. Her father had put over $200,000 at different increments and times in her account. So I think she had about $400,000 in her account in Cabo Verde and Portugal, and it's cumulative. So it's the cumulative of all foreign accounts. So if you have 3 accounts, each under $10,000, you need to report those because the cumulative amount is more than 10,000. So her husband was like, oh, well, I have accounts in Canada, but I'm sure they're not over 10,000.
Oh, no.
He pulled the bank accounts. His were, but not nearly as bad.
Right.
So we're pulling bank accounts from Cabo Verde, Portugal, and Canada. Canada, easy. But we're trying to translate those and figure those out and do the reporting to the IRS. And in this case, there's a lot of reasons why someone wouldn't have to report this or they wouldn't know. She's a foreigner. There's a language barrier. Her father did it. She had no idea. And we were able to take care of her pretty easily. But one case, it was funny. This guy was from Russia and someone died in his family back in Russia. And he was living in New York at the time. There's a huge Russian population there. And they took the insurance proceeds, put it in his account for about a week or so, and then dispersed it out. He ran afoul of FBAR. Didn't even know it. And so someone else at the time, the voluntary disclosure program was 20%. They had him pay 20% or roughly $20,000 to resolve it. And I said, look, he had no idea. I got in there, fought tooth and nail to get it reversed, was able to get that reversed, get him his money back. And he ended up paying $0.
Oh.
Doesn't really happen anymore. Really, right now, you're looking at 5% on most cases. I could tell these stories forever, though.
Well, I love it. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to connect with you. And what I'm noticing is you can, because of the way in which you teach, because you're not only telling us stories, you're also educating and teaching us, right? That's clear. But someone like me who's not savvy with this, and communication is my thing, right? Reading and writing were my thing when I was in college. I was also a teacher and an assistant principal for years before I opened my own business. math and finances, that's been a hard area for me. However, I feel really smart listening to you because you make it so easy and palatable and understandable. And I'm guessing that when someone comes, you talked about, joking that your boss, the gal who runs the office, will joke about you making people cry. I'm feeling a sense that they feel relieved that someone understands them and that there's hope, and that you're there to link arms with them and guide them through it so that they can live beyond the chaos or even the fear that they've done something wrong.
I can't tell you how many people come into my office thinking they're going to get arrested, that their home, their vehicles are going to get seized. I've seen it happen, but when people do everything wrong, 99 times out of 100, people are nowhere close to that. And giving them an idea of what their options are, and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that the IRS isn't just going to come in and seize all their assets, is provides so much relief that we can take care of them. And we mentioned the ads out there. There is so much fear mongering out there. The letters that people get are insane. They're designed to look like tax warrants, and they'll use language like tax warrants, arrest imminent, your assets are about to seize,
from other parties,
from lead generation companies. So it's not just other companies doing this directly, but a lot of lead generation companies will scare the living daylights out of people just to get them to call, and they get put into a high pressure sales call right away. So if you call a company and you're put into a high pressure sales, get a second opinion, get a third opinion. And I tell people, look, if you have questions, call someone else, look us up, check us out. Don't jump in with 2 feet just because they sound nice. But if you feel like you're pressured at all, talk to somebody else too. Get informed before you make a decision.
And then again, to go back something you said early on in our conversation, the IRS is making things more accessible for us online. However, it is still difficult to talk to somebody and to know which department you need to connect with. However, that's where you all come in, because you can help us navigate that and direct us in the right, or handle the case for us.
And they're making it harder than ever to get through to the right people. But that's why, again, that call between 5 and 7 p.m. Wednesday through Friday, I don't mind repeating that ad nauseum.
I love it.
But it is harder and harder for people to know what their rights are. Yesterday, I actually shared an article from an international tax attorney in Forbes. And she, great article talking about how legally the IRS doesn't have to acknowledge or respect any of their FAQs that they post, any of their notices that they put out, their announcements that they do in their news, which comes out regularly throughout the week. If you search something out, and just because you find it on irs.gov doesn't mean it's accurate and that you can rely on it in their tax case.
How do they get away with that?
So there's a little known memorandum that was put out. You could have used to be able to find it online by doing an online search, but their official policy is that those things were not fully researched by the IRS. They're, a lot of, and you're
yeah, you can't see me. I'm not on camera, but I'm wiping my brow and my hands are on my face. I'm shaking my head.
So the worst thing you can do is rely on verbal advice from the IRS. They give bad information all the time. And I talk to them and, they tell people, well, you have to pay right now. You have to do this. You have to file 10 years of returns. The bad advice is endless. But when you get a few layers deeper, if you get to collections called ACS, the advice gets better, but sometimes they give bad information too. And there's been plenty of times where I have cited the Internal Revenue Manual and faxed them the citation saying, here's where you're wrong. But I'm nice about it. I try to be nice about it because nobody likes to be corrected. We still have to work with them. But one of the things this international tax attorney was citing is that the IRB, Internal Revenue Bulletins, is the only thing besides the tax code that's dispositive to the IRS. And if you want to fall asleep, read the IRB. It comes out every week, and it is worse than counting sand. It's just horrible. It's absolutely horrible. But again, this is why it's so hard to have good information. And but one thing that I definitely try to push, if you're not familiar with the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, it's actually been codified by Congress, so it is part of the tax code. And it says that people have a right to know their options, a right to be informed, a right to be able to get through and talk to someone, to be represented by a professional.
Mhm.
And there's about 10 different tax rights in the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And in many ways, the IRS right now is absolutely failing to respect those.
Yeah, you used the word respect earlier, and I was surprised. I leaned in because I really, now it makes sense. Well, it doesn't make sense, but that is the situation we're in. It makes no sense, but that's the situation they've created for us. We only have about 5 minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about the SBA loan defaults that are happening and get your ideas and thoughts around that. What's the best way to deal with EIDL and PPP loans when you can't pay back? Well,
Great
you
question.
took a long, deep breath.
So it's just a lot of information here. So
Let's just touch on it.
yeah, I'll just touch on it. So the SBA gave out all these loans for COVID to get money out quickly. They didn't verify businesses. I actually have talked to people that got money fraudulently. If you got money fraudulently, pay the loan.
Because they will figure that out at some point.
Well, it's not worth them figuring it out because then there's criminal penalties and prosecution for obtaining loans fraudulently. If you used an EIN for your PPP or EIDL loans and you just can't afford it, the business is shut down, you can walk away from the loans if it's under $100,000 for the PPP loans and $200,000 for the EIDL loans. You just won't be able to get another SBA loan until that loan is paid off or resolved.
This might not be a wise question. You said if the business is closed, do that. What if the business is open and you can't pay those loans?
So the SBA has what's called a HAP program, where you can do a temporary hardships. You can pay 10% of your monthly payment for 6 months at a time. They will usually give you 2 of those at 10%, and then they raise it up to 50%. We've seen it go as high as 70%, and then they want the full payment monthly. So it provides temporary relief for a short period of time, but if the problems with the business persist and you just can't make it, there are SBA loans forcing businesses to close down.
Mm-hmm.
And people just took as much money as they could.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't make sure that they could actually afford it when the payments started, or they expected things to turn around. A lot of businesses just haven't turned around. Today it was just announced that Con Appliance is shutting down, which is well known throughout the country, filing for bankruptcy. And there's more business bankruptcies this year than I think going back to 2010. So it's a scary thing out there.
Yeah.
If your business is still open, or if your business isn't closed and it was more than 200,000, you still have rights. You still have options. You can do a hardship plan. You can do an installment agreement to pay less than what they're demanding, which is absolutely outrageous because it's now been sent to conserve. I want to be mindful of the time.
Yeah, you're good.
So I have one gentleman, they gave him 2 options: pay us $90,000 and do $2,000 a month. I think it was around $250,000 owed, or you could pay us $50,000 up front and $4,000 a month. His monthly income is around $7,000. Neither one of those options would work for him. So we're doing a temporary hardship for him. And there is an offer and compromise program as well. But again, it's one of those things you have to qualify. You're not going to get a $20 offer from on SBA loans. But whatever they do forgive, they're going to issue a 1099-C cancellation of debt. So then you'll have an IRS issue.
Oh, wow.
To deal with as well.
Again, all these moving parts.
It's complicated. And this is new. This change where they're sending all these tax debt or SBA loans to Conserve and other collection agencies, that has become their main mode of whenever things default, they send them there instead of to the BFS, which is part of the Treasury. That only changed 6 weeks ago. So again, the government's overwhelmed. They can't handle things. So if you do have those questions, call us. We'll go through in detail instead of, I feel like I'm running. Yeah.
Wow. Hubert, so great to get to know you and just sit and bask in your wisdom. I've got a lot of questions, but we'll do those off air. To stay in touch with you, what is the website for Guardian?
GuardianTaxLaw.com.
Great. And are you personally active on LinkedIn?
I'm not, but my media team takes care of that for me.
Okay, good. So we can find you all on LinkedIn. Guardian Tax Law, Hubert Johnson, managing attorney. Shout outs to your great team, which I really loved. We got to know them a little bit and appreciative of that. And to your BNI group, and just again, how effective BNI has been for you as a professional over the years. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insight and expertise today.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Absolutely. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Center. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean tax law. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thanks for listening.